I was on a mission to bring a great model, Christina, out of the studio and into real-world environments. Who is Christina? She's a beautiful, tall, young model who is destined for greatness. The second part of this mission, the full-frame, mirrorless Sony Alpha 7, which I borrowed from Lumoid.com. I would only have a few days with the camera, so I wanted to make them count. I could have stayed in my lab, taking pictures of test targets and stuffed animals. Instead, I taught myself the camera in a hurry, took a scouting visit to the location, and then, the next day, did the real photo shoot. I had the Alpha 7 and Sony's fantastic 55mm f1.8 prime lens. How did it all work out? Let's talk about it. I was a bit nervous about using this completely different camera for a shoot without having used it for very long. I typically shoot Nikon or Canon, but while there were some growing pains, the shoot turned out great. Let's back up though. When I first received my package from Lumoid.com, I ripped it open. But before I even took a photo, I checked over the body to learn where the buttons and dials were and went through the menus. It wasn't so difficult to get used to the different buttons and dials and menus. I was pretty much able to figure out what things were and which things I needed to turn on or off in the menus without having to look it up in the manual. Actually, I didn't really like how the camera is set up by default, but like I said, I was able to figure things out quickly, like turning off pre-focus and turning on single-point autofocus, decreasing the sheer volume of information that you have available to you in the viewfinder too. Now let me say that having to change the settings isn't a complaint by any stretch. I expect with any camera that I pick up that I'm going to have to make customizations to have it work how I want it to work. The key is to be able to do the customization. And Sony delivers on that. So right away, I liked the feel of the camera in my hands. It's small but sturdy, and the 55mm f1.8 lens is sizable, which helped to balance the weight of the camera body. Since I was able to figure out the workings of the camera so quickly, I was able to spend more time getting used to the camera actually just being in my hands and getting used to having my fingers move the right way to do quick settings changes. I took the next day and a half to take as many photos as I could. I took photos around the house, I took the camera to the Arizona Science Center, and I took Raymond the intern to scout out locations leading up to my shoot with Christina the model. Here are some shots from the Science Center. These are some stairs. Do you know how many steps it would take to reach the moon? I do, because I can zoom into the answer and read it, even at ISO 6400. That's a lot of steps. And here's a wagon wheel at f1.8. Zoomed in, this lens is darned sharp. This is about where I was focusing. And here's Raymond pretending to be my model while I was out scouting my location. By the time I was shooting with Christina, I felt comfortable with the camera, which was especially important because Christina is a new model. I knew that I would be directing her quite a bit in her posing. I knew that I would need to physically show her some poses and also move around her a lot to get different viewpoints because she doesn't necessarily know her good angles yet. Plus, I knew I would really need to pay attention to each shot. With a more experienced model, I'll probably just turn image review off and shoot and shoot and shoot, comfortable in knowing that we're creating some good shots. With a new model like Christina, I did turn image review off, but I paused fairly often to take a look at what I had and to every so often show her when we had a good shot. One really cool thing that would enable anyone to make the camera work for them are the configurable custom buttons. There are 3 of them. This is amazing, and as I said, I could quickly set up the camera the way that I wanted to, which might be completely different from the way that you would. Like, I wanted the C1 button, which is right next to the shutter release button, to enable me to choose my autofocus area. It's a sturdy little animal. It's easy to handle, but not too light. It has some weight to it and a good solid feel in the hands. That is important to me. If it feels cheap and flimsy, I won't enjoy using it. The Alpha 7 feels rock solid. Like I mentioned earlier, even at f1.8, the shots are super sharp and crisp. Raymond and I even debated as to whether or not they're actually too crisp, almost like digital renders. It's not that it's a complaint at all. Crisp is good, but I also don't mind soft and grainy shots from old cameras. I enjoy that each camera that I use seems to have its own soul. Now this camera isn't for mashing down the shutter release button to get lots of photos in one burst. While it is quite responsive with autofocus, and it can shoot 5 frames per second, when I was shooting in RAW and I wanted the camera to autofocus on Christina for every shot because she was moving, I didn't get that many frames per second. It was closer to 2.5 frames per second. And the buffer filled up quickly, plus it took a bit of time to recover so that I could shoot again. The camera is super responsive in many ways. I mentioned autofocus a second ago. Also, it's mirrorless, so you're working with an electronic viewfinder. I know what many of you think about that, and I love a good optical viewfinder, but I'll tell you guys, this thing is bright and instant. There's no lag. Plus, it's easier to compose in low light with a good electronic viewfinder like this one. Sony is showing us that electronic viewfinders can be fantastic and that they're here to stay. So basically, all of the things that I wasn't sure about in the beginning, the unfamiliar workings of the camera, the sheer volume of information that you have available to you on your screens, I was able to get it all out of my mind and out of my way, and I was able to focus on Christina and have a great shoot. And you know what? No matter what camera you're using, the basics still apply. Visualize, compose, and shoot. And with the customizations that I made to the interface of the Alpha 7, the camera told me what I needed to know and allowed me to hide the information that I don't care about while I'm shooting. Also, it was easy to make adjustments when I needed to. By the way, in the description of this video, there's a link over to lumoid.com and also to a post on my site containing many of the images that I captured with the Alpha 7. Sony likes to be a step ahead in a lot of areas, whether it's cameras or other consumer electronics. This camera is a step ahead compared to many others, mirrorless and DSLR cameras. It's small, fast, full frame, and fantastic to use. For me, it's about the handling and image quality. It delivers in both those areas. It delivers in many other areas too, like the onboard Wi-Fi without the need for silly plug-in adapters, and the support for legacy lenses of all types with lens mount adapters. People are doing fantastic things with this camera using lenses that are decades old. Is this the perfect camera? I don't think there is such a thing, and there's no way in 3 days or even 3 weeks to be able to fully evaluate the camera in the long term. But I'll tell you guys, I was pleasantly surprised. Now, many of you know that I'm a Nikon gal, with a little bit of Canon thrown in for good measure. Am I a Sony girl now? Well, I had to send the Alpha 7 back to Lumoid, but it worked great for me, and it wouldn't bother me a bit to use one again for any type of shoot. Overall, here are some of the things that I loved. It had customizable buttons, it was small but sturdy, it felt great in my hands, it had a substantial lens, and the lens was super crisp, even at f1.8, almost too crisp. It's responsive, and it can be charged with a USB cable. And only a couple of minor things that I wished were just a little bit different. The LCD screen is on or off. You can't have it off for image display, but then have it on for menus. If you could do this at least, I couldn't figure it out. Wi-Fi is on by default, and pre-focusing is on by default. Is the Sony Alpha 7 the camera for you? I have no idea. Lumoid.com makes it easy to find out though. Head over to their site to check out this and other cameras that they have available to borrow. In the age of online ordering, we've all bought things that we may not have tried out beforehand, which can be a little scary. Lumoid.com is a great way to actually try out gear in the real world that you may want to buy, and you can do it for surprisingly low prices.